Good morning, everyone. Good morning, Professor MacArthur, Honorable Chairman Takar Ramsaji, Prophetess Nomusa Dlomo, Katnim, Advocate Machine Naidu, Professor Rileboele Molitani, Barrister Moyosori Binton, and Miss Motlani Kamugelo, all the way from Botswana. So I want to appreciate everyone. Thank you so much for joining us this morning as we come together to have a conversation around the eradication of gender-based violence, GBV, and harassment. And the question we're going to be asking, and we're going to be trying to answer this morning is, are we doing enough? And we know that some of our audience are just probably in the middle of something, but they will be joining us soon. So without further ado, I will be calling on our DVC for the College of Law and Management, Professor Brian MacArthur, to address us. Thank you so much, Prof.
Thank you very much indeed, Advocate Balogun. Our esteemed panel, our speakers, member of the KZN legislature and Minority Front leader, the Honorable Shamin Thakur Rajbansi, MPA representative, Advocate Omashni Naidu, Prophetess Nomusa Dlomo, our respondents, our esteemed Pro-Vice Chancellor for Social Cohesion and J.L. Dube Professor in Rural Education in the School of Education at UKZN, Professor Relebohile Moletsani, lawyer and international development practitioner, Ms. Moyesore Olubantin, poet, Ms. Montlana Kamogelo. We look forward to your rendition. PMB CLMS SRC representative, Mr. Batwanda Mki. And finally, our Director of Proceedings and my colleague, Advocate Victoria Balogun Vertoken. Greetings to all colleagues. My name is Brian MacArthur, and as Acting Deputy Vice Chancellor and Head of the College of Law and Management Studies, it is my honor to welcome you to part one of our symposium discussing gender-based violence, GBV, and issues of femicide. Whilst I'm delighted to work with this esteemed panel, I'm also saddened that we cannot have met under better circumstances, that this burning issue remains pervasive within our borders and globally. Please join me in a moment's silence to acknowledge all who have been impacted by GBV. Thank you. Although we recognize that GBV affects both men and women as victims and perpetrators, the stats reflecting violence against women and children are alarming. According to a statement released in March 2020 by the United Nations Under-Secretary General and Executive Director of UN Women, Ms. Phumzile Mhlambo-Ngcuka, every day around the world, on average, 137 women are killed by a member of their own family. Global Risk Insights reporting indicated that here at home, more than 2,700 women have been murdered as a result of GBV since 2000. These stats, as we know, are most likely underestimations. Despite persistent grassroots campaigns and discussions such as these today, many women and children in South Africa continue to suffer abuse. Sadly, the global pandemic has meant that South Africa's GBV problem is getting worse. Lockdown measures continue to confine vulnerable individuals with perpetrators of abuse. To paint the picture, Global Risk Insights have also uncovered that during the first 3 weeks of the lockdown, the government's GBV and Femicide Command Center, a call center supporting victims of GBV, recorded more than 120,000 calls. This is staggering. The National Strategic Plan, the NSP, on gender-based violence includes 6 pillars, namely 1, accountability, coordination, and leadership. 2, prevention and rebuilding social cohesion. 3, justice, safety, and protection. 4, response, care, support, and healing. 5, economic power. And finally, 6, research and information management. With inputs from our distinguished panel of experts and various constituencies, the hope is that we fervently continue to seek to readdress GBV through the NSP, as well as shine a spotlight on the social ill, to share stories, advise, and collaborate. Let us actively deal with an issue that has no place in this world today. Social media commentator, Feminist Next Door, under the pseudonym M. Raz, asked Twitterverse in 2018 to imagine a scenario, and I quote, "Women, imagine that for 24 hours there were no men in the world. What would or could you do that day?" The responses streamed in. One said, "Go for a run in the middle of the night. I put on my shoes at 10 p.m. and run." Another said, "I'd walk from my office building to the train station alone, after dark." A third said, "The list of things that I could do is so unbelievably long that I wouldn't know where to start. My brain would short circuit from too many options." The right to safety is a fundamental human right. This should never be a fantasy, and yet we know otherwise. Colleagues, before I conclude my welcome address, I would like to pay tribute to the person whose brainchild this initiative is, Mr. Batwanda Mkhi, a college SRC representative. Mr. Mkhi wrote to my office requesting that as a higher education institution and knowledge partner, we lead this conversation in the hopes that it brings us one step closer to a solution, noting that even here at UKZN, there have been instances where staff and students have been implicated in GBV, whether as victims or as perpetrators. The university is currently revising its strategic plan in this regard. From productive interactions with Mr. Mkhi, we now find ourselves here and now at the beginning of a discussion with our esteemed panel. In addition, we will be honoring another of Mr. Mkhi's requests of a tree planting ceremony this spring week in recognition of Helen Joseph, Lillian Ngoyi, Rahima Musa, Albertina Sisulu, and Sophia Williams de Bruyn on the 65th anniversary of their historic march, where they led 20,000 women in solidarity, sending a bold message to the world that women's rights are human rights. Watint abafazi, watint imbogodu. You strike a woman, you strike a rock. With these few words, colleagues, I welcome you all to this important discussion and hand back to Advocate Belogan Vertoken. Thank you very much.
A very big thank you, Professor MacArthur. We really appreciate your leadership. And we really don't know what we'll do without you. And we can only thirst and pray for more leaders like you, who has not distanced himself from the needs of the minority group, women, and impact of GBV on children. You are such an inspiration to all of us. So we really thank you for your leadership. So thank you once again to all our participants. And I want to use this opportunity to welcome our guests. We do understand that you've got other commitments, but in our collectivity, there lies our victory. For so many years, we have been silent about this GBV virus, and it's about time we get to serious work, and let's get talking. And from our leadership, you can see from Professor MacArthur's address that it is about time, and he's taking the forefront of it. So what are we doing? So please join me. Our first speaker today is going to be someone that you probably all know, and what a privilege indeed to have with us this morning, Honorable Shaman Takao Rajbasi, who happens to be the member of the KZN legislature and also the minority front leader. Honorable Shaman actually has, I'm so inspired by this woman, a series of degrees, including pharmacy. She's got a degree qualification in pharmacy. She has an MBA degree from the University of KwaZulu-Natal and a master's degree in public management. As you would have seen from the invite, you can see a bio already, which is super detailed. So without me actually slowing down or wasting more time, I know everyone is ready to hear what she wants to say. Please allow me to welcome Honorable Shaman to the platform. Thank you so much.
Hi. Hi.
Good morning.
Hi, everyone.
Good morning.
Good morning. Good morning. All right, I'm going to share my screen now. All right. Greetings to Professor Brian MacArthur, Advocate Victoria Belogan, fellow panelists and participants. Thank you very much for giving me this opportunity. You know, as a member of the KwaZulu-Natal legislature from 1999, we get various opportunities to speak. However, for over a decade now, gender-based violence has been occupying an increasing space in our debates. So as a way of introduction, I would be wanting to put, you know, my talk in context. And to do this, of course, I've got to answer those two questions that have been raised by Advocate Belogan. But in order to do that, then we have to get on to the next question that would arise, and that is, are South African laws morally policing citizens, or are they actually turning South Africa into a police state? So as legislators, we are told not to draft intrusive laws, and people must shape laws through participation. Therefore, your input at all times, even today, will actually determine the balance of societal power that we achieve as a democratic country based on the rule of law. Remember that South Africa has missed the 2015 Millennium Development Goals. And we must also be mindful that the correct interventions can actually change South Africa into a country where citizens feel safer. And together we can achieve both the Sustainable Development Goals as well as our National Development Plan by 2030. And for that, I don't think we have a lot of time. It's just a matter of another 9 years. And now I will, of course, go straight to answering the two questions that have been set for this webinar. And the first one is, are we doing enough? Well, today, South Africa is notorious for its high levels of GBV. And, you know, the stats as of the 2019 and 2020 year has given us a number of 42,289 for rape cases, as well as for sexual assault, 7,749 cases. Now, if that is not alarming, if you have to get current stats as of this year, that is the first quarter of 2021, from April to June 2021, we've had an increase of 74.1% in terms of sexual offenses, sitting at 12,702 cases. Well, this Women's Month as well, as Professor MacArthur had stated, that the Department of Social Development, ESD, had launched the Gender-Based Violence and Femicide Strategic Plan, GBVF. And this plan, of course, has also been embraced by our department in KwaZulu-Natal, and it does consist of 6 pillars. However, if you have to study these 6 pillars, you'll realize that they only tackle the problem symptomatically, not preventatively. And the first pillar is accountability, coordination, and leadership. And this is where legislators like myself have a key role to play. And for more stats, as per Gallup Law and Order Index 2020, South Africa ranked amongst the unsafest countries in the world as the citizens live in fear. So as you can see, global monitoring and advocacy groups are actually reporting, these key socioeconomic stats on South Africa, and therefore, as a country, these figures do not paint the road to Denmark, so to speak. Furthermore, we have to now start looking at this first question, and that is, are we doing enough? Well, first, let's look at poor law and regulation making and flawed policies. And I'll put just a few examples to illustrate this, because these are closely linked examples. A, the continuance of the child support grant, which is CSG. B, age extension for children from 18 years to 21 years in order to accommodate teenage mothers who are returning to school or learners who are repeatedly failing. Now, this is contrary to the age limit in the Children's Act, which is 18. Then we have reducing the age for liquor consumption from 21 years to 18 years. And that has led to South Africa infamously being branded as one of the most drunk countries about 4 years ago. If you look currently, 2021, the alcohol consumption by country ranks South Africa as the second highest. That's at 30%. So what we need to note here is that it is clear that weak laws, policies, and regulations will have unintended consequences of social ills, such as gender-based violence. Last year, if you recall, when the liquor stores were closed because of the hard lockdown measures, GBV reduced. And as the levels were relaxed, GBV increased. But I think it's too early to tell. We rather do year-on-year, correlation studies to see, whether we can make this inference related to alcohol. But of course, there's also a push for such policies pre-election by lobby groups. And these force, a very risky socioeconomic country direction for South Africa. You will see that just before an election, a major election, groups push for these kinds of laws. And if you look at MMR, which is maternal mortality ratio, infant mortality ratio, HDI, you see these are all key development indicators. And we as a country, we're lagging in these. There's so many other issues that are related to alcohol, like fetal alcohol syndrome, cerebral palsy. These numbers are staggering in South Africa, and we need to address these issues. The next question is, how did we get there? Well, the Moral Regeneration Movement, MRM, began in 2006, and it was led by Professor Paula Zulu, one of our very own academics, who presented the charter to the former President Mandela, and thereafter it was placed under the care of the former President Jacob Zuma, now the Honorable Deputy President David Mabuza, because this program sits in the office of the Deputy President. And this program has an estimated budget of 350 million rand, which is generally eaten up with talk shows. Now I'm going to focus on two pillars or two values in the whole charter of positive values under MRM that I thought is pertinent to my discussion. First of all, enhance sound family and community values. This charter says that family and community are core socializing units that inspire and create moral and ethical values in society. And for these reasons, we must commit ourselves to promote family values, fidelity, responsibility, respect for parents, elders, nurturing of children, support for the elderly, and the development and maintenance of the household. Then we must fight against domestic violence and neglect of family responsibilities, whether due to substance abuse, cultural belief, or gender discrimination. We must cultivate a family and communal environment that promotes a culture of care, generosity, and inclusivity. We must use resources efficiently and equitably to benefit of all family and community members, benefit others as well as ourselves through personal growth and acquisition of skills, promote and harness collective responsibility among families and communities within the spirit of Ubuntu. And we must promote safety nets for families. The next positive value was ensure harmony in culture, belief, and conscience. South Africa's racial and ethnic diversity has a capacity to inspire and enrich a culture or value system that can sustain the values embodied in this charter. And for this, we commit ourselves to promote freedom of conscience, religious tolerance, and the acceptance of different ideological persuasions without prejudice or favor. Promote independent critical thinking and a culture of participatory debate. Promote respect for beliefs and value systems of others. Promote the right of every citizen to give expression to his or her views without fear or censure, intimidation or harassment. Oppose all forms of prejudice, whether individual, corporate, or through membership or association with an organization that undermines the integrity of others. And lastly, promote equal opportunities for all persons, including disabled people and those suffering from HIV and AIDS and other forms of disease. So we then come back to talking about gender-based violence, which is not wrong. And for these, I want to put forth the following recommendations. Firstly, budgeting. That is to treat each human being as a moral unit and then as an economic unit, and this is for our policymakers. Secondly, it's to change counterproductive laws which lead to bad behavioral outcomes. And this, of course, is the task of legislators like myself and the judiciary to give us direction. Although we do have a separation of powers, and that is important because that directs us. And then to restructure institutions. And I'm glad that UKZN is having this webinar because you're a key higher learning institution. And that is to promote advocacy on moral regeneration. For example, a one-stop center campus clinic. And I've been always passionate about this. I remember from my days in UDW, if you walked into a campus clinic, all you got was like 2 Panados and you didn't really get spoken to about anything. You just, you were just told whatever. You were never really heard. But I think times have changed, and we need this. We need a different kind of campus clinic. Then mandatory relationship counseling by faith-based organizations at all stages, including pre and post-marriage. So therefore, the NGOs, faith-based organizations, institutions of higher learning have a key role to play. The National Planning Commission must ensure that we do not miss the Sustainable Development Goal and the NDP 2030 by preparing a diagnostic report post the countrywide GBV webinars and the events that have been currently held. And I just saw one even with the University of Fort Hare. So the next thing is outreach. We must implement alternative ways of engaging our citizens. For example, we must introduce citizens panels on KZN TV. We must create special court juries and establish a citizens, advisory committees. Then regulations, these must be smart. They must be simple, they must be measurable, achievable, reliable, and they must be timeless. There are time limits to everything, even in a democracy, even in freedom. Freedom has limitations, so we need to do this in order to restrict mixed bag behavior. Our Constitution, one of the best in the world, the Bill of Rights in Chapter 2, intends that monitoring and evaluation, M&E, must be rights-based, it must be development-orientated, it must be undertaken ethically, with integrity, methodologically sound, and operatively effective. Parliament and the legislatures must establish a women's budget committee, like is done in many of the other Commonwealth countries, and we prescribe to these. And lastly, of course, we must move the MRM program from the offices of the Deputy President, I believe now, to the Commission of Gender Equality, CGE, because women now need to start talking about moral regeneration. And we have to take it to, unfortunately, we've given the men a free run for many years, but we now have to do it for ourselves. Women have to support women. And as a way forward, in terms of active citizenry, the following acts and bills require amendments or regulations. One is the Domestic Violence Act of 1998, and I know that currently sexual assault courts are being mooted, but I would actually rename it to a special GBV court, which is more broadly termed and accommodates all different types of abuse issues, whether it's men or women, boys or girls. And then, of course, the Choice of Termination of Pregnancy Act of 1996. I know there was a lot of controversy about grief counseling, but I am one who believes that that grief counseling must be mandatory for young women. And then the Firearms Control Amendment Act of 2021, and this has to be relooked because the right to firearm ownership for self-defense is something that needs to be included, but maybe highly regulated. Then, of course, the Religious and Cultural Bill 2021, which is also a controversial bill, but I really believe that our government here is in the right direction because there must be no violence or women oppression preaching, for example, in religious places. Then the Customary Marriages Amendment Act, and we did a huge amendments recently, a few months back, but I believe that women must review the acceptability and sustainability of polygamy as an example. And because all our laws are not cast in stone, they are continuously changing, and we need to become proactive and change them. And of course, the Basic Education Laws Amendment Bill of 2011, here I believe that now time is really ripe to stop talking, but rather start working very hard to make sure that cultural, religious, and moral regeneration-based curricula becomes a reality. So to summarize them, South Africa is a participatory democracy. We represent the whole fora of policymakers, that is the legislators, the regulators, judges, voters, media, lawyers, teachers, students, our lecturers, basically every citizen. swamps official policymakers who set the formal rules. To achieve the NDP and the 17 SDG goals by 2030, we must consider favoring equitable outcomes and be willing to sacrifice some wealth to attain them. Is it a better way to ensure equity than through actually regulation is the burning question. So if we have to resolve our triple challenges of poverty, unemployment, and inequality, then we have to answer even those more burning questions. Hence, regulators should recognize that these trade-offs too, and they must decide to what extent efficiency can be sacrificed to actually create as much welfare and prosperity as possible. For me, this always requires a balancing act in Parliament because these debates can be really thorny and they can push any which way. And finally, in conclusion, I come back to what we were asked. Are we doing enough? No. How did we get there? Well, as I said, flawed policies, poor law and regulation making. So there must be some way, a better way forward. And I think that, we have to ask this, whose responsibility? For me, and for us all, I would say it's everyone's. Because, however, although it's everyone's, women must be the dominant voice. And what do we need to do? We need to petition and to lobby Parliament to change weak laws affecting women and children by actually participating in the many, many public hearings that Parliament holds throughout the country whenever laws are being discussed. And this is our duty as responsible citizens. So I want to end by saying that indeed freedom is not free. Therefore, every generation needs to earn its own freedom by making conscious decisions. So happy Women's Month to everybody. And thank you once again to the panel for giving me this opportunity to address you. Thank you.
Wow. Thank you, thank you, thank you, thank you once again, Honorable Shimen. You are always excellent, straight to the point, inspiring, motivating, and above all, you just challenge us all over again. This is, when they say food for thought, and being the first presenter, I believe we are really in it for it today. So thank you. We know you're super, super busy, but given the kind of person that you are, you still managed to talk to us today. We really appreciate that. We know that we've got audience and you might have questions. Please start getting your questions ready. Thank you once again, ma'am. We really appreciate your leadership and your engagement at every level. We appreciate you for today once again. So we will call on Advocate Mashini Naidu to proceed. Please, once again, we apologize. We had to move the program around a little bit. So can we have Advocate Mashini on the platform, please? Thank you.
Good morning, ladies and gentlemen, all protocol observed. Thank you, Program Director, for this opportunity. It's always an honor to be able to speak on issues of gender-based violence and femicide. And you once again give me that platform and the opportunity and privilege to do so. Allow me to share my screen as well as I present on a very important topic. Sorry, colleagues, there we go. So the role of the National Prosecuting Authority in prosecuting gender-based violence cases is quite an important area. I want to share a slide with you that says, someone once asked me, how do I hold my head up so high after all that I've been through? I said, it's because no matter what, I am a survivor, not a victim. And I want you to remember this as we go through this presentation. Time permits, I would like to return to this particular video because it tells a million words just through reading through this. Ladies and gentlemen, gender-based violence is not a new phenomenon. And the United Nations has also defined gender-based violence. Gender-based violence is that is directed against a person on the basis of gender or sex. It includes acts that inflict physical, mental, or sexual harm or suffering, threats of such acts, coercion, and any other deprivation of liberty, while women, men, boys, and girls can be victims of gender-based violence. Women and girls are the main victims, unquote. Ladies and gentlemen, where are we? What is our reaction to gender-based violence? And to begin with, let's look at our Thuthuzela Care Center. You've often heard me speak about the Thuthuzela Care Center as a one-stop rape crisis center, government's reaction to gender-based violence. What is the Thuthuzela Care Center? Turning victims into survivors. And that speaks to the first slide that I had presented, turning victims into survivors. So let me explain the Thuthuzela Care Center model to you. This was government's reaction to the scourge of gender-based violence in our country. At present, we have 55 sites throughout the country, with 9 of these sites being in KZN. Very quickly, these 9 sites are in Ngwelezana, based at provincial hospitals, ladies and gentlemen, at Ngwelezana, at Ngwavuma, in Stanger, in Mahatma Gandhi, at Prince Mshieni, at RK Khan, at Potchefstroom, Madideni, and Edendale hospitals. Now, when we speak about the Thuthuzela Care Center model, it speaks about a victim-centered, court-directed and prosecutor-guided investigation with stakeholders. It's a mouthful, but what does it mean, ladies and gentlemen? It means that when I walk into a Thuthuzela Care Center, where there is a number of stakeholders that are present, I walk in to meet a site coordinator. And my site coordinator greets me with a warm face. How can I help you? And I didn't ask to be raped. I didn't ask to be beaten. And when I was raped, he took away my dignity, my privacy, my integrity. But as I walk into the TCC, the Thuthuzela Care Center, there's somebody there to welcome me. What does the site coordinator do? She informs me as to the process that's going to take place under the roof of the Thuthuzela Care Center. She tells me about the doctor that's going to examine me. And if I'm uncomfortable and I need a little bit more time, then she says, tell the doctor so, he will hear you. And if I say, I don't want to be examined right now, and I don't want anybody to touch me, she hears me too. And she allows me to speak to a social worker that helps me to understand the trauma that I've been through. And when I'm ready, she allows for the process to unfold where I'm examined by a medical officer. And when I feel that please don't touch me, and I tell the doctor that I don't want you to touch me right now, the doctor hears me. And once I'm done with the doctor, I'm given a fresh set of clothes, I'm allowed to shower, and I'm given something to eat. And once I'm done there, a police official is waiting for me for my statement. But I don't want to give my statement right now. Can you give me some time? And the SAPS official does exactly that, gives me my time. And within this process of the Thuthuzela Care Center, I am slowly being turned into a survivor. Also, what's important is when I speak about court-directed, affiliated to the Thuthuzela Care Center is a case manager. So my case that I open at the Thuthuzela Care Center, I do not have to go to a police station, and I do not have to go for counseling outside the Thuthuzela Care Center. My case is now managed by a prosecutor called a case manager. And when I see the accused outside and I am now saying, why is he outside? Has he been released? Has his case been withdrawn? Perhaps nobody believes me. But just before that, I get a call from a victim assistant officer who's also at the TCC, and she tells me, today the accused appeared in court. He was granted bail. These are his bail conditions. What have I done? I've kept my survivor informed. Where you have an empowered survivor, you have a strong survivor. So when the accused walks out and he says, but I've actually been released, nobody believed you. That wasn't the case. He was granted bail. The victim assistant officer will also tell the survivor about bail conditions. So when he comes knocking at the door and he says, but I've been released, you now have an investigating officer's number. The accused is in violation of a bail condition if he's been told not to come near you or your family or your property. So what do we want to achieve by our Tutuzela Care Center, ladies and gentlemen? A reduction of secondary victimization, I say, and this is not a mammoth task or a mission impossible. Let's eradicate gender-based violence because we can do it together. And let's improve our conviction rate. What's also important, ladies and gentlemen, about our court system is that we have dedicated sexual offences courts with dedicated specialized prosecutors dealing with sexual offences cases. So our matters are in good hands. Our specialist prosecutors dealing with sexual offences cases receive the necessary training dealing with gender-based violence, but also receiving training on social context. Why is social context important, ladies and gentlemen? Because you don't have the right to judge. You don't know what I've been through. You cannot fill in the shoes that I walk in. When I said I went to a nightclub and I had a drink, does it mean that I said yes to him having sex with me without my consent? So you don't have the right to judge me. And that's the training our prosecutors receive. This is a picture of our Tutuzela Care Center at Mahatma Gandhi Hospital. Now, ladies and gentlemen, a little bit about the law. South Africa boasts the best laws relating to gender-based violence and femicide in the world. And I say that again, the best legislation when it comes to gender-based violence in the world. Our Criminal Law, Sexual Offences and Related Matters Act, 32 of 2007, again, is a brilliant piece of legislation. Why? Because today I go home and my husband says, I want to have sex. I'm tired. I don't want to have sex. I want to have sex with you. We are married. So he pins me down and he has sex with me, but I didn't consent. Is it all right? I paid for you. Does it make it all right? The answer is no. Why? Because you didn't consent. Isn't that marital rape? Isn't that rape? Yes. Because no means no. What about that he's a boy? Could he really have been raped? Of course, yes. But he didn't penetrate her with his penis. It was just a finger or a pencil or a broomstick. That wasn't rape. Of course, that's rape. How often have we seen cases where a broken bottle head is placed into the vagina? How often have we seen cases where a log is inserted into a vagina? Rape. What about those instances where he touched my breast? He only touched your breast. Isn't that sexual assault? I didn't give him that permission. Clearly, there was an intention for him to touch my breast. And this is what our law speaks to, ladies and gentlemen. Let's talk about our duty to report. Let's talk about who has this duty to report. Let's talk about our children. Let's talk about our mentally disabled persons. Do I turn the other cheek when I know the child next door is being raped every day when she comes from school and her dad says, I've got something good for you today? And then you hear this child scream and you know that she's being raped. What about the mentally disabled child or person that you know is vulnerable and is being raped? Section 54 creates that obligation on you to report. What about, but I did absolutely nothing. I just stood there as my friend raped her. I just said, show her who's the man. What about that? Aids, incites, instigates, I'll come after you. I'll charge you. So this is your duty to report. How often have you heard that he was my uncle, I was only 9? And my mother said it will go away. So keep quiet about it because you're going to cause problems in our house. So I kept quiet. And 20, 30 years down the line, I meet the same Uncle Peter at a family function. And those feelings come back 1,000,000 times over. But I can't report. Why can't you report? Because I deal with trauma differently. People deal with trauma differently. Today I walk into the TCC and I say, that man who I call my father has raped me. And yes, I report that matter. Or I walk into the TCC and I ask, please, can you help me? All I want is medication, PEPs. It's my dad that raped me, but I don't want to tell anybody. Please don't tell anyone. Yes, there's an obligation to report. And let's make this a little bit different. There's an obligation to report. But in saying that, and the social worker needs to report to the police. But for whatever reason we don't, or I don't report, I don't tell anyone, I don't go to the TCC. And it's just between mom and I. And when I see uncle 30 years down the line, and my husband says, enough is enough. I support you. I've always supported you. Let's go to the police station. Can I do that? It's 30 years down the line. Who's going to believe me? The answer is yes. The answer is a blatant yes. Because our law says exactly that. Be it 10 days, be it 20 days, be it 1 year, be it 50 years, you have that right to report. And there is no prescription on rape. Your lead case here, ladies and gentlemen, is the Bobby Hewitt case. Domestic violence is a silent killer. It's such a silent killer. But you're stupid, aren't you? How often have I told you that you bought your degree and you're worth absolutely nothing? Without me, you are nothing. You're just my trophy that I take around with me. And that's verbal. And what about when he hits you black, blue, and silly, and then he says, oh, sorry, my love. I didn't mean for it to go that bad, but you know I love you. You know I always have and always will love you. And then I get the most beautiful flowers. What about when he says, your money is my money, and don't think because you are working, your money belongs to you. I run this house. I wear the pants in this relationship. What about all of these factors, ladies and gentlemen? How do we deal with this? So just because I'm a man doesn't mean she can't hurt me. I am human too. But nobody believes me. Isn't that true? How often have we seen our male brothers, fathers, uncles being victims of abuse, but they won't report. Why? Because of fear of stigmatization. How often have you heard, but when I said I was beaten by my wife, they laughed at me. They literally laughed at me. But he is a victim too. So what can be done, ladies and gentlemen? Let's get a protection order. Let's go to a magistrate court and get a protection order. You come back, and this protection order is an interim protection order, and you will be asked to return where your interim protection order is made final. Do not be told that you don't have to come back to confirm your protection order because it's done automatically. No way. You don't go back to confirm your final protection order, then there is no protection order. Make sure that you go back to confirm your protection order. Make sure you indicate in your protection order what has transpired. How often have you also heard, but I love him. He's my husband. I just don't like when he drinks and then he starts to hit me. But other than that, I love him with my heart and my soul. Doesn't mean you have to leave the marital home. It doesn't mean that you have to leave your husband. All you do is your protection order will say, do not hit her. Do not hit your child. Do not physically, mentally, socially, economically abuse her in these ways. But also remember, I want to share something with you very quickly. Many years ago, whilst I was still in court, I had a matter. And in this particular case, the lady came to me and she said, my husband hit me. It was an assault, common assault matter. It wasn't at the domestic violence court. And she said it wasn't her husband, it was her boyfriend that hit her. And I asked her, are you sure? Are you really sure that you want to withdraw this case? And she said, yes. I had subsequently left that court, only to be told years later that that same boyfriend had poured petrol over her and set her alight. Thank God that she's still alive. But we cannot be withdrawing domestic violence matters. And that's a directive from within the NPA. You will send your survivor for counseling. And there are many NGOs that are available and social development that will provide the necessary counseling. But you will not withdraw a domestic violence protection order. No. So the manner in which you will do this is you will go to a magistrate's court and you will fill in the necessary forms with the necessary affidavits. And this is done with the clerk of court and it's submitted to a magistrate. And the magistrate will then consider the information both by the perpetrator as well as yourself. Ladies and gentlemen, as I round off, I want to speak to you very quickly about protective measures within our court system. How often have you heard, but I don't want to go to court because I don't want to face the perpetrator? You are protected, ladies and gentlemen, by the mere fact that this is a sexual offense case. As a prosecutor, I will argue that you testify in court, in camera, with the only people that are present is going to be the perpetrator and the legal personnel in court, including the judiciary. If you don't want to face your perpetrator, and I have psychological reports to show that, then I will ask that you testify as an adult in a separate room. And that's in terms of section 158, through a CCTV camera system, where you testify in a separate room and the court and people in court, as in the accused and legal representatives, can see you and hear your story. I will apply for court again to be held in camera, where the only people that will see you through the CCTV camera would be those officials and the accused. The camera is then inverted, where you would be able to point out, if identity is an issue, point out the perpetrator. But identity is always an issue that we will raise. What about a child? What about a child, ladies and gentlemen? Facing and being in court, and where you hear my lord, my lady, and parties, and you have people screaming. Isn't that intimidating even for us? And that's why our law allows for Section 150 capital A, where the child testifies in a separate room, but with the use of an intermediary. Because when the intermediary hears, but my lord, the accused said, his version will be this. The parties to today's event or case are these. The intermediary, who is a social worker or an educator, or a psychologist, person dealing with children, will tell the child, right now, Uncle Peter says that he was never there. And the child will then respond, but Uncle Peter was there, Auntie. And this is what Uncle Peter did. So the intermediary puts information to the child in a manner that she understands. Court preparation officers. I'm so tired. I left home today at 4 o'clock in the morning with my mom. It's now 1 o'clock. I am so tired. The auntie in court with the black gown was asking me all these questions, and I'm tired and I need a nap. Your court preparation officer hears her and will speak to the prosecutor to ask the prosecutor, can we now take an adjournment? Child is tired. She generally sleeps around 1 o'clock. Can we adjourn for today? Your court preparation officer, colleagues, even if I had to be asked today to go to court and testify, it's always the fear of the unknown. I would be nervous. And your court preparation officer helps me as a witness to understand court processes, so it's creating knowledge. How often have you also heard about older persons being abused, ladies and gentlemen? And this breaks my heart. Older people are being abused more and more. And where older persons are abused, and more so by a person that is known, and that's an aggravating factor. And I will raise that in sentencing. Often the abuse of our older people happen behind closed doors. But it needs to stop. And then you have the Protection of Harassment Act, ladies and gentlemen, and falls very much similar to the processes of a domestic violence matter and your protection order. But all he did today at work was say hello. But he does that every single day. Hello. Hi. Aren't you pretty? Or he sends you emails. Gorgeous. Hi, gorgeous. And he does this every day. I don't like it. Or he calls, he breathes into the phone and he puts the phone down. I don't like it. Protection from harassment. Just before I end, what about our children? What about the abuse, neglect, and exploitation of our children? What happens when I hit my child because you didn't do your homework? And I hit my child on his head. And tomorrow he forgot his cricket kit at school and I hit him again on his head. And the day thereafter, he leaves his lunchbox at school and I hit him on his legs. And a few days later, he forgets something else. And as he stands at the top of the stairs, I hit him again. And this time round, he falls down the stairs. This time round, it's a little bit too late. So our Children's Act looks at where we abuse, where we neglect and exploit our children, where I don't give my mom money to look after my children while I go to another province or another country to work. And I expect my mom to look after my child with her old age pension. Am I not abusing my child? Am I not neglecting my child, let alone my mom? So I raise my voice, not so I can shout, but so that those without a voice can be heard. We cannot succeed when half of us are held back. So with that, ladies and gentlemen, I say thank you for listening to me. Thank you for participating. And thank you for holding hands in our fight to eradicate sexual, gender-based violence and femicide. I thank you. Thank you, ladies and gentlemen.
Thank you, Advocate Naidu. That was emotional, that was deep, that was detailed. I believe our audience will have lots of questions for you. Please feel free to start posting your questions. We will be getting to them soon. And we thank you once again for your time. And I don't even know what to say. That was just so deep. And it has challenged us once again to start thinking, and not just thinking, as Honorable Charmaine indicated. We have to talk about it, think about it, talk about it, and let's see the changes that we can bring about. I can see that some are already asking for the presentation. Please would like to appeal to the presenters. Please send in your presentations. We will PDF them and share them with our audience. We are a little bit running out of time. So please, let's proceed. I would like to call on Ms. Tamki, the convener of this program, the inspiration behind this particular session, and one of our own at UKZN. Can I give the floor to you, Ms. Tamki? Thank you.
Thank you so much, Advocate Balukan. To the Deputy Vice Chancellor and Head of the College of Law and Management Studies, to the Dean of the School of Law, the Dean of the School of Accounting, Economics and Finance in his absentia, the Dean of the School of Management, IT and Governance, the Program Director and Coordinator of this program, Ms. Advocate Balukan, my colleagues in the SRC, the incredible lineup of expert speakers. Ladies and gentlemen, allow me and also give me the opportunity to observe all protocol present. The English writer Charles Dickens, in a book titled A Tale of Two Cities, described the period of the French Revolution as being the best of times, the worst of times. It was the age of wisdom, it was the age of foolishness. It was the epoch of belief, it was the epoch of incredulity. It was the season of light, it was the season of darkness. It was the spring of hope, it was the winter of despair. We had everything before us, we had nothing before us. We're all going direct to heaven. We're all going direct the other way. Now, ladies and gentlemen, this contrast forwarded by Dickens reflects the French disposition juxtaposed to London. The slow pace of transformation we all yearn for is far too slow and implemented inadequately. There are few women who have reaped the seeds of this transformation, while many are still repressed, culminating in the two stark contrasts in society. We might celebrate that the cabinet consists of 50% women, that the number of female parliamentarians is at its highest in the history of our country, that there are more women judges than has ever been before. But the ricocheting lows of this moment seem to be making significant strides against the highs. We may speak about the Universal Declaration of Human Rights and how it enshrines the fundamental rights for all people everywhere. We may speak about the Bill of Rights enshrined in the South African Constitution and how it safeguards the autonomy that people ought to have over their bodies in accordance with natural law. Practically, these legal safeguards are of little effect. And this is clearly evident from the incident that happened to a student from the University of Fort Hare, whose gruesome details I fear to discuss. And it actually brings us to a crucial question that with thousands of such cases before our nation's magistrates, how many are unknown to us? And if anything at all, one thing is certain, that something has got to give, because we cannot continue living this way. In as much as I appreciate the Women's March of 1956, the emancipation of women is a noble cause that needs all of us to join forces. And I wrote about this in my article recently published by the university's news outlet Ndaba Online, that this is a fight that cannot be left only to a certain category of society. It is a fight that needs men, it is a fight that needs women, boys, girls, and all other classifications that are there in society. As a progressive young man, I owe an enormous debt of gratitude to the forebears of our nation who fought for a democratic South Africa that has offered me limitless possibilities. That debt is payable by having a social impact through working towards finding solutions for the social ills of our time. And the most pervasive and persistent social ill of our time has been gender-based violence. I chose to study law because I'm a staunch believer in the provision of justice, that everyone should be given that which they deserve, regardless of sexual orientation or gender. And much of what we're witnessing is as a result of patriarchy and how it manifests itself in every sector of society, at home, in the religious spaces, in academia, in politics, the corporate world, and all other spaces where you find men and women. And the violence against women is deeply rooted in the belief that there is a superiority factor that exists in the biological makeup of the two sexes that elevates man to a higher standard. This belief is aligned to the system which is responsible for decades of women's suppression. I come from a home that is mostly made up of women. Growing up, my perception of the world was through the confines of my home, where women's voices held weight and were not suppressed, where objectification of women was a fallacy. However, it was the exposure to the outside world when I was old enough to make sense of things that frustrated me. There was a deep contrast between the reality of women out there in the country and the reality which I'd actually grown to know in the confines of my home. Knowing what I know now and seeing what I've seen, today I realize how lucky I am. And this is what prompted me to lend my hand towards social justice, particularly women's emancipation. We have to commit ourselves to working towards a just society where young girls would not wish that they were boys, because young girls, by the time they're 10, they would have been exposed to at least one incident of sexual abuse. A society where young girls could dream of becoming presidents, chief justices, parliamentarians, without wondering if they would even make it past adolescence, because our country has declared war on women and girls. Some of the women in this platform might have been victims of violence at the hands of men. It could have been harassment in the form of sexual innuendos, inappropriate touching. It could have even been rape. And to those who have not yet, the United Nations Population Fund estimates that at least 1 in 3 women will experience either physical or sexual abuse in their lifetime. This is the reality of women, and they actually have to live with this reality every second of their lives. And as men on this platform, we must see it as our responsibility to say a word and supplement that word with an action. All of us men should be on board in removing the thorn of patriarchy, which has over time grown sharper, threatening to irreparably rip the fabric of our society apart. Some people have suggested that women's rights and human rights are separate and distinct. And I find this to be at the core of this issue, relegating women to a subhuman category with rights different from the so-called the man. And I believe that this is what prompted, or rather provoked, Hillary Clinton's speech at the 1996 Beijing conference, where she said, and I quote, "Women's rights are human rights, and human rights are women's rights once and for all," unquote. Ladies and gentlemen, one of the yardsticks that will be used in measuring the progress that we have made as a country in the promotion of human rights would be the work we have done as a country in the alleviation of atrocities directed at women and minority groups. And by that measure, we are in tatters, as comrades would often say in political circles. Much work needs to be done in demolishing the barriers that prevent women from indulging themselves in the full measures of liberty as their male counterparts. Women, like all other people, share in the common humanity. And it is this that makes gender-based violence an unconscionable violation of human rights. However, we can still turn the tide, and turning the tide would require an active participation from us men. And I always say that the change we can bring forth as men is not really in platforms, rather through speaking and platforms like this. This platform is for equipping us with the correct knowledge and informed perspective. And reaching a formidable understanding of these issues requires, or rather takes more than speech. It does take a conversation. In fact, it takes a constellation of conversations and places big and small. And it takes a willingness to see reason to begin the conversation, not to avoid it. A single symposium cannot change the world and how it treats women, but it can, in quoting Mother Teresa, create many ripples across the waters. And I'm hoping that those ripples will be the beginning of a conversation that emphasizes the need for us, for all of us as men, to join in this fight. Changing the world does not require big things, ladies and gentlemen. It is often the small things that have an everlasting impact. As men, we can free women from the shackles of patriarchy and bondage by transforming the conversations we have amongst ourselves about women. It is in our small circles that the biggest stereotypes about women are born, that subsequently fuel the onslaught about women. And to all the men on this platform, I want you to go home, look yourself in the mirror, think hard about what I've said, and know that change begins with you. You can never change the world if you haven't changed the world within you, yourself to be precise. And with that being said, ladies and gentlemen, I am confident and hopeful that no matter how long the road ahead, we will travel it successfully together. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Ms. Samki, for that powerful rendition. Thank you for being such a big inspiration. We are so touched by your move, by your dreams, and not being scared to lead the way. And as you have challenged every one of us, including our men and our boys, we can only hope that there could be more voices, and there will be more voices added to yours. So we really want to appreciate you for that. So that is actually, I present to you the brain behind the entire program. So what a big inspiration, young, dynamic, on fire, and a go-getter at a very early stage of his life. So watch the space, the young man is going places, okay? So we will go to our next presenter. We have been blessed by a very inspirational, motivational, talented young artist from a wonderful African country called Botswana in the SADC region. What a blessing. And she has actually put together a special poem for this particular occasion. I'm just so like over the moon. Can you imagine? She framed something for us specifically for today. What a great sacrifice and contribution. So join me in presenting to you Ms. Kamogelo Montlani, and she will be reciting a poem which is unique, and we're all going to be hearing it for the very first time, so you can find it on Google. It's called The Sins of Sins. And Kamogelo is actually a 2015 Robben Island Spring School alumni, and she was the best overall speaker for the debate session. And in 2020, she collaborated with the Robben Island Museum and the South African Department of Art and Culture to adjudicate the national debate competition. She is an established Just a young, dynamic entrepreneur and a recent graduate of the Botswana University of Agriculture and Natural Resources. And she is passionate and fond of environmental conservation, as she believes that we are all one because of the environment and the natural features that we've been blessed with. So without wasting more of your time, I present to you Kamogelo Montlani. Thank you.
All right. I'm going to share with you a special poem that was specifically crafted for this webinar. It's entitled Sins or Sins. I am a song that echoes in the hearts of many who truly relate to the song, but nobody knows of the sins that flash back as the song echoes in their hearts. She tries to sit up straight and calm, so nobody sees how her body trembles from the inside. Although she sits by his side, he's made her his wife who's good for nothing but to succumb to a series of blows to her face, leaving her with scars that she's mastered to conceal so beautifully, both physically and emotionally. The violence in her house keeps escalating. She almost made peace with the possibility of never knowing peace and the feeling of being valued. For the man in the song brings lovers, drunkards, worst gets physical with her, yet she holds his hand in sight of those who see them as the handsomely crafted union of husband and wife. She is our song that echoes in the hearts of many. She is to you who takes residence under my voice, a mother, sister, daughter, or dear friend, featured in the chorus of unimaginable limitation, restriction, and humiliation, where we hear the singer's voice crack as the song reaches the highest pitch, knowing she might as well be muted for singing the song. Good Lord, I have strings attached to victors in the last verse of the song. Raima Mosa, Sophie Williams de Bruyn, Lillian Ngoyi, Helen Joseph, and Albertina Sisulu, for they led the historic Women's March of 1956, protesting against women's suffrage. The guitarist in the song spared them just enough strings and time to see near triumph. The baton is in our hands now, and the question reads, are we doing enough to bring this gender-based violence to halt? Do we see enough of strong women across all sectors of the economy? Do we see a good number of them succeeding in leadership? Oh, do we even take that innovation with the seriousness they deserve? South Africa, are we confident to say that we have not failed our women? Thank you.
Wow. Am I the only one that's looking for an handkerchief right now? Did you listen to the lyrics? Just, oh my goodness. The content of that poem, the stanzas, we really, really appreciate you. Please note that she was not given a script. We just asked her, because of who she is and what she does and the gift in her hands, we say, craft something for this special day. And we got that. Please share the words, the content with us. I believe some of us would like to just reflect on that. It's so powerful. We thank you so, so much. I'm not sure, I've got goose pimples. I was just so emotional. Thank you so, so much. We appreciate you. Thank you for the good work that you're doing. Continue to be an inspiration. And one of the things that touched me so far is that we see our young people breaking ground. And this is very challenging. Thank you, ma'am. Thank you, thank you, thank you, thank you. Bless you. All right. So thank you. Thank you. So we will move on to our next presenter. We're a little bit behind, so we're going to fast track our moves now. So please allow me to call on our next presenter, and that will be Prophetess Nomusa Dlomo. Thank you so much, Prophetess, for joining us today. And once she's done, we will go straight into the discussion, and then we will finish up with the Q&A. Thank you. Prophetess Nomusa, the floor is yours, ma'am.
Thank you, thank you, thank you, thank you. Thank you, Vicky. I'm still connecting my presentation. Thank you so much, Advocate, and to all our fellow panelists that are here and the participants. Good morning to you all. Just for a minute as I put forward my slides and share. Yes. Is that visible?
Yes, ma'am. Yes, ma'am.
Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you.
All right. Okay. Okay. Thank you. In addressing the question, can we eradicate gender-based violence through faith-based organizations? I thought we can introduce this subject by looking at the impact of gender-based violence and child abuse in our society. It is without question that the dialogue we are having today on gender-based violence and child abuse has ripped and destroyed so many lives, women, children, and families. Our society is broken and hurting. We can hear a lament in every corner of our nation. Our streets are filled with blood, our fields are filled with graves. Faith leaders are increasingly visiting graveyards, not because of the current COVID-19 pandemic, but the parallel and most gruesome pandemic is gender-based violence and child abuse. The play parks meant to be the safe havens for our daughters and children have become the danger zones. There is fear all around. Every parent with a girl child has to call several times to ensure her safety. To say gender-based violence and child abuse is a pandemic may be due to its viral behavior. However, we may as well look at it as a massacre, since it involves a deliberate and brutal killing of women and children by men who have chosen to look at women as objects rather than as human beings. We need to be constantly reminded that we are created in the image of God. Therefore, none of women and children in our nation deserve to be treated in an undignified way and have her life cut short. We can then look at my next question. which we need to pose as faith-based leaders, which says, what is our role? My answer to that question would be, faith-based organizations have always played a role in instilling values that develop good morals and ethics in society and in human lives broadly. These values shape and create positive social behavior within societies. From the day a boy and a girl child is born, individual families will connect that child to a faith community for spiritual blessing and support. The early stage support is aimed at developing a responsible citizen within the family and the community. Remember that a balanced human formation comprises of spirit, soul, and body. All these three aspects need continuous nurturing for a well-developed and balanced human being. Exposure of children to violence, media influence, movies, soapies has negatively impacted the character of children within our society. Children are also exposed to domestic violence, which negatively impact their mental state and influence their social behavior, without watering down the pain and the suffering that women and children in South Africa are experiencing. We also need to look at some of the causes which might be contributing to the problem we are faced with today, such as broken families, lack of men forums, which groom boys into manhood, child-headed homes. These problems are caused by a deeper problem, which is a socio-economic imbalance in our country. Societal culture has also created unnecessary pressure and expectation on women to get married early. This often leads to overlooking of some of the existing abusive tendencies and behaviors in relationships. For example, if a woman gets married at a later age and stage, in the African culture, you will hear songs that are derogative, such as Sambamba Umatana Naza, meaning an old ape is getting married. These are some of the pressures that are created by society that puts pressure on young girls and women to subject themselves to relationship prematurely. We also need to address the issue of forced teenage marriages, known as ukutwala. There is practice, especially in some rural communities. These practices give entitlement to men to violate the rights of young women. What is our response as faith-based organizations towards eradicating GBV and child abuse? I will draw my conclusions and closure by stating that faith-based organizations are well positioned within communities to deal or contribute in the eradication of GBV and child abuse. It is without doubt that most families belong to faith-based organizations, which place them at a more advantageous position to speak out and to be able to deal with any abusive behavioral patterns they face. Again, faith-based organizations have a responsibility to create and provide a safe environment for the victims of gender-based violence and sexual abuse, as some victims would call their spiritual institutions for help even before going to the doctor or even call the police. It is true that some of these violent behaviors are aggravated by patriarchal power, which disadvantage women. Some are invoked by certain religious ideologies to justify certain forms of violence. These religious ideologies influence and condone certain gender-based violences. These may include subjugation, prohibition of divorce, and perseverance in marriage, which may aggravate violence and sexual abuse. These causes can be addressed through transformative interventions, such as prayer sessions, premarital and post-marital counseling, forums that are created within communities and within the faith-based organizations, workshops, imbizo, adopting a school campaign. If every faith-based organization can adopt a school with the aim of raising awareness and to build morals. We also need to be vocal and firm in teaching our girls and boys not to tolerate any symptom of abuse in relationships. Again, women need to be more vigilant in ensuring that they don't expose themselves in places which could risk their safety. There is also a growing concern about the high percentage of the use of alcohol and drug abuse, which also lead to sexual abuse and violence. We also need to deal with the high rate of young girls who become premature mothers, which result in the growing number of premature fathers. The faith-based organizations cannot achieve this without the partnership with other stakeholders, such as the involvement of community leaders, psychologists, neurologists, social workers, schools, governing bodies, associations, business community, local government, the legal fraternity, and other societal structures. It is without question that religious leaders are agents of social change, and they play a significant role in shaping behavior towards positive social experience. As I conclude, there is an old known African proverb which says, "It takes the whole village to raise a child." Let us then hold our hands together to protect women and children, to heal and build our beautiful country. I will end my presentation by quoting from a philosopher by the name of DJ Kios, who says, I quote, "The danger of supporting or standing behind a person who is wrong, they will take your support as a confirmation that they are right, and whatever they are doing is right. They won't stop doing the bad things they do, and they will think that nothing is wrong on what they are doing or saying, until one day, whatever they are doing, they will do it to you or to someone you know." With those words, I want to close by saying, when all hope is lost and the circumstance is overwhelming, we grew up being told by our elders and faith leaders to pray. We need to go back to the basics of our faith. when we are overwhelmed. As a nation, together, we will overcome. I thank you.
Thank you, thank you, thank you, thank you, Prophetess Nomusa. Challenging, inspiring, sending us once again to that corner where we have to think and reassess, and above all, guiding us on the way forward. We really, really appreciate you. We appreciate your time. We appreciate what you're doing. We appreciate your engagement. We appreciate everything. And above all, thank you once again for your leadership. And I like the way you handled it. It's not a one-month fight. We all need to come together. And this is not the time to bring in discriminatory or stereotyping attitude or reasoning. This is the time to say, Ubuntu, Kimabo, collectivity. That's what we need. GBV at all costs must go. It just has to go. And how do we get rid of it? So thank you once again. We have really, really behind, and please allow us. This seems to be a very interesting and touching session. So please allow me to open the floor to our respondents. If you have questions, please begin to send your questions in. We want to see your comments. If you have any recommendations, suggestions, please use the chat box. We are monitoring everything. So without further delay, I would like to leave the floor open now to our respondents. Our speakers are still on the floor. So I would like to call on Professor Rilebwile Mwetani, the Pro-Vice Chancellor for the Social Cohesion. She's been fully introduced, and Barrister Moyosore Olabinter from the United States of America. Thank you so much. A very big thank you to our respondents and our speakers so far. The floor is yours. And we have the respondents. Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you, Advocate. I'm not sure if my video is working, but I'm hoping that my voice is working. Okay, I'm not sure why it's not working.
It's okay, Prof. We can hear you, even though we would love to see your face somewhere along the line, but please forge ahead. Thank you, Prof.
Okay, so I've been asked to talk to how, having heard what we heard from the previous speakers, how we might weaponize education. And I love the framing of weaponizing education to address gender-based violence. Because granted, we are in a war against women's bodies. I would like to start with a few uncomfortable truths about education. What we know is that from studies on the African continent, women's level of education tend to influence their experiences of gender-based violence, and at the very least, the resources they can access to avoid, to prevent, and address gender-based violence. For example, studies in Malawi and Uganda found that the higher the level of education a woman has, the less likely she is to experience gender-based violence. Of course, we know how flawed this argument is in the case of South Africa, and how for us, using a Sesotho proverb, referring to death, gender-based violence, loosely translated, gender-based violence is the daughter-in-law of all homes in South Africa. It affects every home and every institution and everybody. However, we also know that institutions of education, schools and universities in particular, are by all accounts failing dismally, I might say, in preventing or addressing gender-based violence when it occurs. In fact, if the past few weeks are anything to go by, institutions themselves are sites of extreme incidents of gender-based violence and femicide, particularly against girls and also against differently identifying individuals, including the LGBTQI community. For example, current research suggests that 75% of women in universities have or will experience some form of GBV during their tenure at university. That's astounding, but not surprising. Education experience, that's the second truth that we know. Education responses could potentially play an important role in addressing gender-based violence. Honorable Thakur Rajbansi and Prophetess Nomusa have talked about the role of values education. As an educationist, I would very much like to believe them and to believe that we could use this strategy effectively. But we have in the past, since 2011, been theoretically doing values education, particularly in school. But the results, ladies and gentlemen, or lack thereof, speak for themselves. Similarly, Anthony Collins and colleagues back in 2009, in relation to universities, argued that gender-based violence can be tackled by addressing 3 areas: providing support for victims, establishing institutional structures, and addressing the culture of silence and silencing that surrounds gender-based violence. I would like to argue that universities and schools are doing a relatively good job in addressing the first 2, but we have failed to unsilence women as well as witnesses of gender-based violence in the university. This morning, I listened to a podcast by Eusebius Makaiser, where he was calling out feminists and gender-based or gender activists for their silence in not calling out one of their own, a very powerful man who's currently being accused of abusing his wife. I recommend that we listen to that podcast. On the Honorable Thakur Rajbansi also referred to the GBVF strategic plan, which has 6 pillars, which in my mind also come short. Most institutions have been, as I said, relatively successful in putting together policies and some programming, but have been failing in effectively addressing the very social norms that make gender-based violence possible or even justified. For example, how did we get to a point where a young man in our society thinks he's entitled or justified in murdering his girlfriend, cutting her up into little pieces and shoving her into a small suitcase and dumping the suitcase in the middle of the street? I am, of course, referring to Nosicelo Mtebeni, a University of Fort Hare final year law student who was murdered by her boyfriend because, as he put it, she was cheating on him. Is it because as institutions we have too often looked the other way? Is it because as a society we have too often blamed the women and girls for asking for it and wearing short skirts or going to a party and drinking? These are some of the manifestations of unequal gender norms that continue to make women vulnerable. What will it take for us to address them? How can we effectively weaponize education to challenge these norms so as to change them? In my mind, the education we must weaponize must be defined, organized, and implemented beyond the confines of the formal classroom and institution. to do this, I see our intervention addressing 3 levels. The first is changing the institutions themselves, changing the curriculum, of course, changing the institutional culture, the gender norms that govern us, training the staff. One of the focus must be to facilitate, of course, women's access and success in education, but also to initiate debate and conversations around gender relations in our homes, our institutions and classrooms. The second level is targeting the individual themselves, and I've already talked about that. And the last level is working with and changing the community so that we can change the unequal gender norms. I think this can be organized around 3 questions. The 3 questions are, what kind of institutions, communities, and society do we want to live, learn, and work in? And linked to that, what kinds of relationships do we want to build and nurture in our communities and society? The second question is, what are the barriers to achieving the kinds of quality of human relationships we want in South Africa? And thirdly, what can we do as institutions, including universities, mainly through our research and teaching, but also through our civic engagement to address these barriers and nurture the relationships needed to build a cohesive UKZN, a cohesive Durban, a cohesive KZN, and a cohesive South Africa. Finally, it is only when we can commit to these conversations that Mr. Mki called us to engage in and acting on the solutions they generate, that we can truly push back against the rampant gender-based violence and femicide in our society. Specifically, these conversations must privilege the voices of girls and young women, but of young people generally, as key to understanding the issues and identifying or developing strategies that work, rather than those we impose as the more powerful in society. Thank you.
Wow, thank you so much, Prof. That's really lovely. And once again, one of the things I appreciate so far is that we've been pointed in the right direction. We know that there is a problem. We know that we're doing some things, but what are we doing wrong or what are we doing right? And how do we improve on what we're doing? So thank you so much for that enlightenment, that detailed discussion, also based on ongoing research. We really appreciate you. Thank you so much. Can we call on Barrister Moyosore Olabinton to respond so that we can go quickly into the Q&A and finish up? Yeah. Thank you.
Okay, good morning, and thank you for the opportunity to be here today. I must say that all the speakers have been amazing. And again, thank you for having me. Actually, I thought I was going to be responding to questions, but I mean, now I need to respond to, all that have been said so far. So I may be touching on different points. And to proceed, I would like to say that I will be responding from the perspective of an international development practitioner. So before I start, I just want to say to us that gender-based violence is not just peculiar to Africa as a continent or South Africa as a country. It's a global phenomenon. It's a global issue that is affecting both men and women all over the world. And there's the data that I have here. So according to a 2021 data by World Population Review, in the US, over 10 million people experience gender-based violence on an annual basis. And to narrow it down to the states where I currently live in, Maryland to be precise, the data says that 34.4% of women have experienced intimate partner violence, while 28.8% of men have also experienced intimate partner violence. So from an international development perspective, we typically look into the root causes of issues in order for us to have, a sustainable solution. Because if we say, okay, we want to address gender-based violence and we don't attack it from the roots, we will definitely not have a sustainable solution. So there are three key root causes that I have identified. And the first is that gender-based violence typically occur based on failure to meet expectations of gender roles. So that's the first point, and I'm going to explain it briefly. But before then, the second point or the second root cause that I have identified is also the unequal power dynamics between the genders, the male and female gender in different societies. And the third is the absence of failure to understand and respect the dignity of the human person. So let me start by explaining the first root cause, which is the failure to meet the expectations of gender roles. The way most of us who are Africans are raised by our parents is, growing up, you would hear, oh, the guys should do this, the girls should do this. Basically, the girls should do the domestic roles in the house. They cook, they take care of the children, the younger ones. They cook, they basically do the domestic things in the house. While the men, they go out, they take care of the productive aspects, of family life. They basically do the things that are meant to bring in money to take care of the family, while the women just sit back at home, do the regular domestic chores. So when a lady who does not have this kind of understanding or this kind of training, this kind of training growing up, marries a man who actually believes that, okay, there's a particular role for a woman in the family, when they begin to live together and the woman begins to show him that, okay, I do not have this kind of training. This is not part of my culture. I don't have to do everything. I don't have to clean the house. I don't have to sweep. I don't have to raise the baby alone. There will be discord in the house because the man does not believe that the woman, should absolve herself of these responsibilities. She's meant to do all of these things. So when she doesn't do all of these things, there might be violence in the house. So in that situation, the woman has failed to meet up with the expectation of gender roles in the family. So the second aspect is the unequal power dynamics. Again, because many of us, the way we are raised, we are raised to believe that, okay, the man should be the breadwinner of the family. It should be the leader. It should be the one, it should be the one to provide for the family. It should be the one to make decisions in the family, the economic decisions, in short, take care of all the decision-making process in the family, while the woman is expected to be the submissive wife, who doesn't contribute anything economically, who doesn't, contribute to decision-making process. So when things change in the family, and for instance, maybe the man loses his job, is not able to provide for the family, and fortunately for the woman, she's able to provide for the family. She has a lot of money, she has everything working for her. It becomes very difficult for some men to accept that because they begin to feel emasculated. They begin to feel they have lost their sense of identity as a man. And in that situation, for those men who cannot undo that, they resort to violence and they begin to, beat their wives or molest them or even mentally assault them. And then the third point is the failure to understand and respect the dignity of human person. So basically for me, I think from a human rights perspective, if we all as humans, understand that we are human beings who deserve to be respected, who deserve to be loved, who deserve to be honored, and who deserve to be treated with dignity, we wouldn't be talking about this at all. And I'm going to give you an example. There are some people who have pets, like animals, like rabbits, like dogs. If you watch TV or you go on YouTube and you see the way people handle their pets, the way people take care of them, feed them, provide for them, take them to the veterinary doctor to ensure that they are in a perfect state of health, that is the same way we human beings should treat ourselves. The man should treat his wife with dignity, and the wife should also treat her husband with dignity. So when we have these three root causes, settled, we might not be talking about gender-based violence at this time and age. Well, I want to move on to some of the challenges we currently have, when it comes to gender-based violence. So like so many of the speakers I've mentioned, we have so many laws that are protecting women, even boys and men from, gender-based violence. So the issue is not really about us not having laws. We have a lot of laws all over the world. In South Africa, a lot of laws have been mentioned. Even here in the United States of America, there are a lot of laws. But what are the challenges we have despite the existence of these laws? And the major issue from this is the failure to implement these laws. This is a major issue all over the world. So for instance, a lady says she has been abused by her husband. She goes to the police station and the police says, oh, what happened? And then she explains what happened. But to some of these police people, they feel like this is a private affair. It should be something dealt with within the home. It shouldn't be brought to the public. So lady, go back home and address this issue with your husband, or a man, go back home and address this issue with your wife. So some people still don't have that understanding that it is a public issue and it's something that should be dealt with publicly and not just privately alone. So we also have the issue of data. So many times when we have, if we do have a lot of data to reflect or to show us the rate of gender-based violence, we will be definitely surprised. You know why? Not a lot of people come out to say, I have been violated, I have been abused, whether mentally or sexually. A lot of people don't come out. It happens to so many people because, every day you see a lot of beautiful women on the streets with the makeup all done. You don't know that prior to stepping out of the house, their husbands, I've dealt with them. So most people don't talk about it, and people don't talk because they want to save their marriages. They want their children to have a place to stay. They want to keep everything going for the sake of their kids. So people don't really come out. And apart from that, most people don't want to come out to talk about it because of fear of persecution and also for fear of future retaliation, either by the persecutor or the family, perpetrator, and also maybe by the family of the perpetrator. So people don't really come out and we don't have enough data. Maybe if we do have a lot of data, there might be more training for our security officers to take things, serious, and also for these laws that we have in place to be fully implemented. And then specifically to the situation in South Africa, I also want to talk about I think it's called Lobola. Please correct me if I am right or wrong, but I pronounce it as Lobola, which to me means the payment of dowry when you're about to marry a young woman. So I think for most people, they believe that when they pay this dowry, that automatically entitles them to that woman, her entire life, her entirety, like they own her. They see her as an object. So as an object, I can deal with you whichever way I want, however I want. I think this mentality has caused a lot of trouble for us and has caused a lot of trauma for so many women, because when some men talk to their wives, they tell them, oh, I paid for you. I think one of the speakers made reference to it, Advocate or Mashani made reference to this. Like, you tell your wife, I own you, so I can do whatever I want to you. That is the wrong mentality. And we need to begin to sensitize our men to know that the fact that you paid bride price on a particular woman does not mean that you own her. That does not mean she's an object. She's a human being who needs to be treated with all the dignity that every human being should be afforded in life. Then I also want to talk about access to guns. So generally, I did my research, and though it's an old one, this data says that 34% of the intimate partner violence in South Africa is done by persons who carry guns, mostly security officers like policemen, soldiers, and what have you. So I think it's very important for us to not just, handle or give people guns or give people easy access to guns. So people who carry guns, especially the security officers, we need to give them a lot of training such that they know when to use their guns, and also, to know that guns are meant to be used for the official purpose and not just to be used in the house to deal violently with our women and young girls. Okay, so I need to round up now, but I just want to quickly touch on how gender-based violence, heightens poverty. So generally, amongst women, we already have challenges like gender wage gap, discrimination in places of work where women don't earn the same as men. And there's the data here in the US which says that for every dollar a man earns, the woman earns just 70 cents. So currently, women don't even earn as much as men, even for the same position in the same office. So for some women who don't even have jobs and they are married to persons who violate them, it's very difficult for them to step out of such marriages because they know that when they step out, there will be no shelter for them. there will be no provision for food for them. There'll be no provision for their children. So they would rather stay in such marriage and they remain poor. And then for some men, they believe that that is in the aspect of economic violence. They believe that the monies their wives make is for them. It's not for the women to spend. And some even control their wives to the point that they don't allow them to work. So women who find themselves in this situation remain poor because they don't have any opportunity to provide for the family. They can't even stand on their own up to the point of, stepping out of the marriage to safety. So I'm going to stop here so that we can take some questions from the audience. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Barrister Moyosore Olabintan from the United States of America. We thank you. And we also appreciate the fact that you were able to also take some time out and look at the data on South Africa, and then also giving us a perspective, a global perspective of this GBV virus that we are looking at. So I think there is a little bit of a consolation here. We can see that it's not a problem that is peculiar to South Africa. However, we cannot say no because the whole world is experiencing GBV. So then we can just watch our women and children, fall victim 24/7 to this. So we are taking the lead and say, well, enough is enough. And these are the gaps. These are the things that we feel like we need to do. And we are bringing back, we need to bring back Ubuntu. We need to bring that back, that collectivity, that unity, because that's where our strength is and our strength will be. So thank you so much for the insightful comment and response. And our presenters, our speakers, actually, they have given so much, and we can see how our respondents have come in to respond and then, of course, help to expand on this. And also with the respondents having responded and the speakers haven't spoken, you can already see their areas of specialty and comfort. So please send in your questions. As we are now, we know that we're behind. We're so sorry about that. We will do better tomorrow and some other time. So please, can we take your questions? And I just want to appeal to our respondents and our speakers to please quickly have a look at the chat to see if there are questions there. I know that there was a question from someone, and she wanted to know about the Tutuzela Center, and she was asking that, has she been violated in a particular place? Does that mean that she now has to get onto a combi or some kind of transport and then travel across town to get assistance at the nearest Tutuzela Center? So I'm not sure if anyone on the platform can take that apart from Advocate Umashani Naidu, because I think she was the one that actually talked about Tutuzela, and she seems to be highly knowledgeable about their operations. And I'm also not sure if she's currently active with us right now. So I would just like to give that up to the platform, to the panelists, and to respond. And then the second question is from by one of our guests also, Toto, and she's just wanting to know why and how more older men and our fathers and our uncles, Kimabongulu and the rest of them can join in this fight. And also if they take more active role, maybe the rest of us can follow, of course, imitate them, and the younger boys can follow. And of course, it will also help the society, as Prophetess Nomusa Glomo highly indicated, that, by leading in the right way, we can actually also go back to raising our boys the right way, or what we will regard as the non-GBV, founding way. And I think that's what Ntoto's question is speaking to. So if I can throw that back to the panelists, and we can get a response to those questions. And we just want to appeal to you to send in more questions, because this is now the time to respond to questions. So we will do this like in 3, 4, 5 minutes maximum, and we will round up because we have exceeded way beyond our plans. Okay, thank you. Can we have someone respond to either of the questions or both of them?
Could you repeat those questions? I was trying to go through the chat box.
Okay, all right. So the question that is flagging right now is, let me just see where the question comes in. And the person wants to know, however, if older men, male members of the society could also be involved in this kind of, like this initiative. And of course, as the younger one, the younger men will be looking up to them, and perhaps if they can support. So, and then maybe intimidate them. So basically, he or she wants to know that, well, is there still hope? If we, like we had Mr. Mki joining us today on and putting this together, but maybe instead of having the younger ones taking the lead, maybe if we have the older men coming in, do you think that can help us to achieve what we want? Let's take that question first.
I think that's a very important question. It goes back to what I had cited earlier, that we need an increasing setup of forums that could address and be prepared for young boy grooming, and that would really eradicate and deal with the current challenge that we are faced with much of such forums and openness, because what is the norm is that we often sit as women and get to discuss about these issues, and the perpetrators are often outside and not part of the audience and participants, and take note of the issues that they need to take back to their circles and begin to engage in families, in different structures and associations that they are involved in. I believe that with much involvement of male figures, both young and old, will greatly assist in addressing the issues we are currently dealing. Yes.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Prophetess. We thank you for that great insight. Can we have Honorable Shamin? I acknowledge you, ma'am. I can see your hands up. Can we have Honorable Shamin respond?
Yes.
Thank you.
Yes. I want to thank, first of all, Chantel's question. I think it would have been answered very well by Advocate Mashne. But from my side, what I think, and I've always thought that this is lacking in our country, generally you find in other countries, you would have one standard line, an emergency line, if any citizen was in trouble, like a 911 or something like that. But in South Africa, we are given a few lines and they're long numbers. And a lot of people, therefore, and a lot of these are non-functional because they are lines and nobody answers, even if you call them. And I think that a time has come where in South Africa, we have one standard line for the whole country. If there's an emergency anywhere, someone can ring this number and immediately help gets out to you, and you then get directed appropriately where to go, and someone comes out to help you to go there anyway. So I think that kind of coordinated effort, and this can be for anything that's happening to anybody. The other thing about the response to Toto, I think that one is very important. You say it's about implementing things rather than just putting things on paper, and that's where it stays. So we've been, for a long time in South Africa, we've been one of the most progressive countries where, from the time of the Beijing platform, where we have argued that, we want 50-50 balance, gender balance in any position, anywhere, whether it's in government, non-government, wherever. And we have done extremely well in terms of that in the country. And therefore, I don't think for us it's a problem if from now on, going forward, you see, July is a month where we do a lot of men's issues. We concentrate on men's issues, and the men's forum activities take place. Our like the premiers of our provinces, they control those. And then the Women's Month in August, it's a speaker's program, and we do that as a sectoral parliament. But I think that institutions outside and as well as parliament, we can do with the 50-50 split in those panels, so that even when it's a men's forum, where 50% should be women, because we should listen in on what the men are saying and then respond. And then when it's our women's panels, we should have 50% men and across the age groups, so that we have a good balance. And then everyone's learning from everyone, because although we will dominate, say, the women's, but the men will respond. And then that's the only way in which we can do these platforms, have mixed platforms. And proportionally, then, you get this consensus coming forward, and finally everyone starts speaking the same language, because they have debated it, they have argued it, they have understood the issues on both sides, and they have a consensus as what should be the way forward. And this will also direct, apart from changing behaviors across the board in our society, it will also help decision makers as to what are the thematic things, what are the burning issues, and how are people looking at it. I think that those are very good questions, and maybe that's how we should start handling it. Thank you.
Thank you once again, Honorable. Thank you. We are really out of time, and yet questions are coming in. May I please just ask our participants to please use the Q&A box, because with that your questions go straight to the panelists and it's easy for them to see, and then we are able to respond. I can see that people are posting questions in the normal chat. Please use the Q&A box at the bottom of your page so that we can respond quickly instead of having to sweep through. In 1 minute, I just want to go through that. I think there is a question here, and the person says, I would like to find out if possible, that the way we've been raised is a reason behind the high gender-based violence related cases. For instance, when we raise kids, we reprimand them maybe a good 3 times. And if we don't, and if they don't listen, we eat them. Doesn't this model in us that if someone does wrong, you reprimand them, and if they don't listen, then you hit them? I could argue the same with the strikes and that happens in the country and the community that speaks out for a couple of times, then finally they resort to violence. Isn't violence the model that we have created when we are raised? So so I think the comment here, or I'm not sure, I mean, it's like a comment and a question together, that, well, if you're raising your kids and your kids are not listening, and you shy at the child, you whack the child, and you're basically saying to the child that, well, as you grow up, if someone doesn't listen to you, then you must shy at that person, you must whack that person. And then, of course, this could, of course, raising a boy to understand that for you to be submissive and obedient, you must be beaten. So the same boy child could grow up, or the same girl child could grow up and begin to whack the spouse, that is the husband or the wife. So this person is saying that shouldn't we also maybe look at the way that we are raising the kids, and of course correcting them and teaching them how to obtain or observe submission and and diligence. And by this takes us, I think this probably takes us back, of course, to classifying, having to reprimand the child as violence. And I believe our constitutional court has spoken about that. So I don't know if anybody wants to respond to that in 1 minute. And then the next question is, the state has set up the Commission for Gender Equality, which seems to be quite dysfunctional and is facing interference from some parliamentary quarters. How can we as civil society put pressure on government to be accountable and to make the CGE effective. So I believe this is probably coming from somebody from the civil society or thereabout, that how do you, like for instance, the Commission on Gender Inequality is not functional. So how do we hold the state accountable? I'm not sure if anyone can answer that. And then the last question that we're going to take is, what can be done to monitor the service in the healthcare center and the SAPS to improve reporting? Perpetrators are not reported because our nurses and police are very rude, and they are impatient. And they are impatient to victims of violence. So we're looking at the gap with the SAPS and the medical team that are insensitive and therefore not reporting. I think Advocate Mashini did mention that, of course, there is a duty to report. And then, of course, when we have like part of the Chapter 9 institutions, for instance, the Gender Commission, that is not functional, how do we hold the state accountable? And also, are we the ones fueling the violence? As women, we reprimand our kids, we hit them, we slap them, the way we are controlling them or correcting them is basically, could this be what is being, given back to other women as our children, our boys grow up to become men? I don't know if anyone can just in 1 minute respond to those questions, if it is possible. Thank you very much. And then we will, of course, close for the day. Anyone? Okay, all right. So if no response is coming, so let me just try. When it comes to the duty to report, I think that what we need to do is that there is an obligation that's already been established, of course, that there is that duty to report. And where there is negligence or probably lack of performance, etc., then I believe also that we can take that up with the, of course, the hospital, or probably, do the necessary reporting, and of course challenge, if we have to challenge the MEC for health, wherever we need to challenge, we need to speak out. The whole idea is that we speak out about what is not working, and we make enough noise until they listen. So the system needs to listen. They are representing us in the first place, so they must listen. We need to speak the language where they go, of course, that they will respond to. Of course, holding the people that are not complying or non-compliant responsible, because now this is getting too much. So even, of course, if the police themselves are not doing their jobs, then of course we need to hold them responsible so that they can do their jobs. Okay, Honorable Charmaine, I think she wants to come in. Honorable Charmaine, you've got the floor.
Yeah, I was just looking at the one on the Commission for Gender Equality, and rightfully so. I think that this committee, when it initially started off, it was absolutely proactive, and it all depends on whether they have stable leadership from time to time. But I know that in the recent years, there were a lot of vacancies, and these are not being filled efficiently. And the problem is that it becomes sort of a leaderless commission, as well as in every province as well. We have someone who heads the CGE, and I know even for maybe a year or two, there was a vacancy even in KwaZulu-Natal. So all these problems, where there are vacancies in critical positions, renders these commissions or Chapter 9 institutions dysfunctional. But I think going forward, we just had an address recently from the CGE, which was after a very long time, but we definitely have been stepping up and pressurizing them that we want the CGE to be effective, and I think we will follow up with that. But I do take that criticism in that spirit. The other thing was that the one about raising children and the high cases of GBV. I think, it boils down to the one thing about, again, lawmaking, regulations, etc., and where to draw a balance, because there's an old saying that if you spare the rod, then you spoil the child. And I think that if we look at those and go by those, it's a lesson for lawmaking, and how far we can take lawmaking and regulations, and whether we are actually sparing the rod and spoiling the child, and what are the responsibilities and duties of parents, and then what are those for us? Because in the lifetime of any child, children have many, many teachers in their life. Their mother is their first teacher, their father the next, and then after that, when they get into the schooling system, they have many, many teachers, and each one is a mentor along the way. So where are the gaps? Whose responsibility? Who's been neglecting their duties? These are the tough questions that we have to answer when things go wrong in our children's life. So I think that, as I said, it's everyone's responsibility, because our children have too many teachers, and we can't all be not doing our job. So it's a wake-up call for everybody. Thank you.
Thank you, thank you, thank you. A very big thank you to you, Honorable Shaman. We appreciate you once again. Thank you. And in taking those questions, we want to believe that those who post the questions can relate to your responses. Please, we are really, we've exceeded our allocated times, and we want to start, but I really want to apologize. The debate is so interesting that we actually ran out of time, and I appreciate everyone for still staying till this very moment. So we've had a very interesting discussion. It's like it shouldn't end, and we should probably have like a whole day, a roundtable discussion about this, but we will be continuing tomorrow. So please join us at 11 o'clock tomorrow morning, and we will be having a new set of presenters and panelists, and we look forward to continuing the debate and come with the questions that you may have. So a very big thank you to all our presenters today. Honorable Shaman, we really appreciate you. We appreciate you deeply. Prophetess Nomusa, Barrister Moyo Sore, Olabinton, Professor Rilebuitle, Mlitani, Mr. Mki, we appreciate you. And I'm leaving someone out. I am leaving someone out. I think I'm leaving someone out. Yes, Miss Montlani Kamogelo, for that beautiful poem. And a very big thank you to all our participants. You have been wonderful. You have been very tolerant. We exceeded by almost 47 minutes, and you still stayed with us. So thank you. We look forward to seeing you tomorrow. A very big thank you to everyone. For those who requested about, who inquired about certificates, etc., please drop me an email. I have, you've got my details. Please drop me an email. Till we meet again, especially to this particular panel, may you all be blessed. And for those who are still available, we challenge you to please invite more people and join us tomorrow for the day 2 of the GBV, Eradicating Gender-Based Violence and Harassment. Are we doing enough? So as you go to your different places, please continue to ask yourself, are we still doing enough? And whatever you have, please bring it to the platform tomorrow. You are appreciated. Bless you all. Thank you very much.